a live question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to submit any questions you may have using the Q&A function on Zoom. And I'll now hand over to our subject expert, John Hurry, who's our platform services team lead here at Rittman Mead.
So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Just first, I'd like to thank Maddie and Hannah for all the hard work they've put in to put together this presentation for us. And effectively, I'm going to give you a little introduction about myself, and then I'm going to talk about HA and disaster recovery. So for my sins, I've been an Oracle consultant for the last couple of decades. I've worked primarily as a database administrator or DBA. I've worked in the finance, IT, and services area, and also in the security sector. So what I'm going to talk about today is basically a high level, so it's not too technical, guys, about high availability and disaster recovery, and really understanding what that means to businesses and how you should look at it. So let's start off with who are Rittman Mead. So we've been around since about 2007, and my team, the platform services team, we provide things like managed services, on-premise and cloud migrations, cloud adoption, bits and pieces like that. The other elements of Rittman Mead include data engineering, so BI, data warehousing, anything like that. And also we have sort of a data science team as well, which does AI, ML, because that seems to be the thing today. So again, we're just going to cover the bits and pieces about DR, but I thought it'd be good to give you an overview of what else we do. So anyway, let's crack on. So I'm going to let you read this yourselves, guys, but effectively what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover these areas. And obviously, if you do have any questions, please put them through and we'll have a look at them at the end. But hopefully I'll answer most of your questions as we go through this. And hopefully it'll be a little bit of interest. So let's kick off. The first question that I tend to ask a lot of customers when I'm sitting down with them to talk about their infrastructure is, how much would it cost if you were down for one day? So, you know, that is quite a big question. I think the biggest answer I've had back would be a customer told me, never mind a day, 1 hour. It would be £1 million and potentially another £1 million in lost revenue. So it is very important to understand the criticality of your systems. And this is going to be a theme as we go through this presentation as well. And our friends at Gartner have also got some pretty big statements, which are around, you know, natural disasters. And obviously with all the storms and everything we have at the moment, it is worth checking because, you know, we are open to these type of things. And COVID being a perfect example of when DR kind of kicked in with home and remote working. So just to give you context about how it works. So as you always do, you need to ask an AI a question nowadays. So I've asked the question, what is high availability and what is disaster recovery? And to be honest with you, the answers are perfectly correct. But what they tend to lack is a bit of context and how to apply them to your own systems in many ways. And that seems to be a question I get asked a lot. So what I'm going to try and do, guys, with a little bit of fun, is explain how we do that. So I'm going to introduce you to my friend Bob here, and he's going to go through what high availability is for us. So effectively, Bob is the perfect example of high availability. He has 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 lungs. He's fully autonomous and basically can do all the work that we need him to do. He's very good, but he also has single points of failure, which is his brain, his heart, and areas like that. So effectively, there are weaknesses in there. Okay. So how does high availability work? So again, I'll go back to our friend Bob here. So as you said, Bob has 2 eyes, 2 arms, legs, etc. So he's highly available. But if he lost an eye, he would still be able to function. He has 1 eye left, so he's perfectly okay. If he lost, let's say, an arm, effectively, he could still operate. He wouldn't be at peak performance, obviously, but could still operate. Okay, so what you're looking at is more of a degradation of service. But ultimately, Bob may give up. And worst case scenario, if one of his critical areas of him, like his heart or his brain, give in, it's not going to end well for Bob. So that is effectively what high availability gives you. It gives you that ability to have resilience in it. Okay, but let's talk about what disaster recovery is. So effectively, we've got Bob here, but before Bob ended up here, what we've done is we've made a copy of him. And we've kept that copy to one side, and through the magic of television, all his memories, his desires, his experience have been transferred to Bob 2. So Bob 2 is a fully operational Bob. So he can carry on working, he can do it. He has all the high availability elements of Bob 1, and as you can see, has fully recovered. Unfortunately, obviously, that can't be said the same for Bob 1, but in the world of IT, you would be able to rebuild Bob 1 from Bob 2, depending on what the particular problem was. Thank you, Bob. Okay, so let's move on to the next bit. So, best practices around DR. Okay. You'll hear these terms a lot, RPO and RTO, and they come under a bigger section of MTD, maximum tolerable downtime, which businesses tend to use to say, as a business, this is the much I can handle. Your RTO and your RPO are used to look at specific systems in many ways and understanding how long they can be down for. So, the closer to zero you want to be, the more expensive it is going to get. It really is that simple. But how do you define these and who should define them is a question you should ask yourself. Now, commonly, IT do end up having to define these, and that's not really, for me, the right place to do that. What you would normally do is you would have your business define these. And there are structures in place like ISO 27001, ISO 22301, which is business continuity specifically, which allow you to identify the importance of these systems and give them that level of criticality, because you don't want your entire estate at a critical, maximum amount of money required to keep it at like zero downtime and zero data loss. They will have different areas of criticality. Some you can live without 24. Some you can actually say, we'll just revert back to paper or, normal practices. Okay, so understanding that and owning the activities and the ownership for it are really important. And that's not really a technical thing, that's more of a business-driven thing. So the next thing you need to do, or step 3 in this case, is really, if once you've implemented something like this, you need to make sure that you're testing it. Testing your DR plan is really important because you're only as good as that last test. And it's really good to run DR playbooks, to have this information to hand for everybody, and also a lot of delays when it comes to DR are on the fact of should we use DR? An air conditioning unit's broken, we can wait an hour, we can wait 2 hours, but that is an impact to your systems. So knowing what to do, knowing how quickly it's going to take, all these points that we've got here will help you define where you are and also give visibility to the business as well of what you can and can't do. So let's get a little bit technical here. So as we're an Oracle house and we have Oracle skills, we're going to use Oracle's maximum availability architecture as an example of how you can deploy systems. Now, obviously, guys, this is commonly focused around databases for this, but the approach is the same. Okay, so your first approach is like the bronze level, and they build on each other as they go up. So bronze is basically a very simple installation, a single server, you've got a local backup, and what you're doing is you're keeping another backup offsite. And that's a very good way of doing it. But obviously recovery times would be greater. So again, back to your RPO and RTO, and potentially the recovery time for the data as well, because you would only be as good as the last backup that you've kept or archives, if you know your databases, that you've got availability to. So that's bronze. Silver, now silver is more like Bob 1. It is what's using a product called Real Application Clusters for the database layer, this is. And what it allows you to do is have 2 nodes or 2 servers connected to a single disk array, which has, if in essence, the brain in it. And what they'll do is they'll pass information back and they'll share that load. Good for performance as well, but also the fact is if you did lose one of those nodes, the other node would pick up the work. Again, so it gives you that level of high availability. Now we go into gold. Gold is one that I've seen, I would say, the most out in the real world and is commonly used. And it uses a configuration of both real application clusters, RAC, and a product at the Enterprise Edition called DataGuard, which allows you to synchronize your databases. It does use the transactional layer. It does not use disk IO or anything like that, or the block copies. So it is interesting to know to point out that you might have different techniques to back up or recover different parts of it, which we will touch on in a minute as well. Then you have platinum. I was going to say the gold standard, but platinum standard. And that is effectively 2 copies of gold in different places. And what you will find is this is basically used for companies or organizations that have geographically separate entities. So something in the US, something in the UK. And what they need to do is they use a product called Oracle Golden Gate, which sits on top of this. And what it does is it does biodirectional replication between the primaries. So it keeps them both in sync, and then they keep the standbys in sync. Okay. Obviously, guys, there's a lot of information on there, and obviously feel free to go and have a look at it. It is a good way of understanding how to use high availability architectures. Okay, some tips and tricks for you. Licensing. Always read the small print because there are some bits and pieces you do need to be aware of, especially with Oracle licensing and other suppliers as well, is your DR site from an Oracle perspective is considered the same as your primary, so it must be licensed accordingly. And again, you can reduce the amount of licensing you have on there depending on how you've configured the hardware, etc. But it is a good point to know. And also, the last time I checked, there is a 10-day rule out there. Okay, but be mindful, it only really applies to clustered systems in the small print. Okay, but obviously, guys, go and check that out for yourself. Due diligence around your estate, and when you're setting up your DR, look at licensing, look at ownership, and make sure that obviously all your boxes are ticked. Data guard, we talked about this earlier. This allows you to synchronize between 2 systems. It's in the enterprise edition of the database, but there is an add-on to it called active data guard. So active data guard is effectively the ability to open your standby database up and access it in a read-only fashion. So a lot of companies, and when I was in the finance industry, we used that a lot to do business information reporting, stuff like that. And it's literally as up to date as you're going to get that data moving forward. And in some instances, what you would do is you'd actually hold it at a certain point so you could do month end or year end reporting without holding up your production system to move forward. So again, looking at DR is not just about, if something goes wrong, but you can actually get a return on investment for it as well. Another area is patching, switching between one system and another when you do it to minimize downtime. If you don't happen to have Enterprise Edition, there are other products out there that can do it as well. One of my favorites is by a company called DB Visit, and it's called DB Standby. It provides you with almost all the features of Enterprise, but on a standard edition database. So can be very useful, and again, can protect your systems in the event that you need to do that. Okay, the the cloud. When you're setting up, and I'll use the database as an example, effectively you get a little tick box when you're setting up your database, and you can enable autonomous data guard. And what you can do, you can choose whether you want that in your current region, or you can do a cross-region configuration, which means that regions do go down, they do have problems, they still have all the issues that we were talking about with Bob. There are potentially single points of failure in there. That would safeguard you to be able to move over to another region as well. So again, something worth considering. Another area is application tier and networking. They do need love too. And this is things like storage, those really important spreadsheets that you may have, they need to be replicated, they need to be backed up or available quickly if they are critical. And again, it goes back to what we were mentioning about RPO and RTO as well. So there you go, that's those bits. So thought we'd end off with a couple of true life stories and things that go bump in the night, because you can guarantee if you're going to have a DR issue, it's going to be at 3 a.m. in the morning. And having experienced some of these in my time, I thought I would share 2 stories with you on how and what happened to give you an example of what I've seen. So the first one is a fiery tale, and myself and my team got a call in the middle of the night from our monitoring system to say the system had gone. So we try and log in, we try and connect, can't get through to it at all. Obviously, there's been a fire. We were talking to this company probably a month or 2 before, and we were recommending perhaps looking at the cloud as an offsite backup, which is a good way of doing it, to give you that level of resilience. They at the time were considering it, but didn't really see the point in it. Unfortunately, their premise, their IT systems, everything got burned. And the reality of it was actually a disgruntled employee, and it was an arson attack. So unfortunately, that company is no longer in business because there was nothing to recover because any backups they had were destroyed within the fire itself. Electrified, not such a horror story here, guys. This one does have a happy ending. A rather large company that actually invested heavily in DR and had two sites, one on one side of the road and one on the other. But unfortunately, they shared a substation. And an electrician was going in one day to do some work, and unfortunately made a mistake and nearly killed themselves. And in the process, took out the substation. The electrician was airlifted away. They did survive. I think they ended up losing their arm, but the substation was down. And then we were obviously called in because our monitoring identified this. We jumped on the systems. We were speaking to their teams, and we did what we could to shut down their systems in time because they were using UPSs or uninterruptible power supplies in the background, basically big batteries. And under pressure, these batteries do not last long. The company also had some generators, but when they went to start the generator up, it didn't work. Okay. We were able to shut down most of the systems. The power was restored, we got them back up and running, but they did have some issues with split brain, which is when data gets all messed up on your database. And we spent the next 3 weeks picking through the holes to try and fix things for them, get them back up and operational. But as it turned out, they never had any problems moving from that point forward, and obviously now do test their DR. So there you go. That is the horror stories I have for you. Hopefully not too bad and you'll sleep tonight. But again, just like to thank you for joining us. That's the end of the presentation. So hopefully not too painful for everybody. Any questions, any bits and pieces? I'll hand back to Madeline to put it in there. One of the things I would say as well, guys, if you do have any questions or you would like to discuss anything that we've done today, please feel free to reach out. We will be doing some more blogs and upcoming webinars, so keep watching. We'll let you know. And then also we'll be at Cloud World. So if you do want to come and visit us, it'd be great to say hello. So thank you very much for joining. And again, thanks to Maddie and Hannah for all the help and support in delivering this.
Oh, thank you, John. We've just got one question I think might be worth going through before we finish, if that's okay, John. We've got when creating a high availability environment, are there any tips around saving licensing costs for DBs?
Not so much for the high availability, but obviously, guys, the licensing conversation is quite a big one. One of the things you do need to be mindful of is hardware segregation or hardware partitioning, which is Oracle's way of being able to sort of limit the hardware. Now, there is technology out there that can do that. The cloud does it automatically because you're choosing your CPUs, and this is the way Oracle do a lot of the licensing around database side of it. But the process is the same. For your DR side, almost yes, you can, because what you can do is you can reduce the scope of that site. And in the event of you having to switch or fail over to that site, what you can do is you can up the processes to meet the requirement you've got because your licensing moves from site to site. If that first site is no longer available, all that licensing moves across. It's not pinned to servers. So yeah, there are ways of saving money in there and being prudent with it as well, looking into it, investigating what you need, and also looking at the performance of the systems. Because if you are looking at rack, and so going back to the high availability question, you really should balance your nodes to be the same as best as possible and have a little bit of extra in there. Because if one of them went down, it would effectively take the whole load of your business. So there you go. Hopefully that answers the question. And thank you, Sarah.
Okay, well, if anyone's obviously got any other questions, then feel free to reach out to us. But thank you all for your time today and enjoy.
Thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. Please feedback. Thank you.